Welcome back to The Leading Edge. Good to have you folks along with us. Many of our segments these days focus on returning to, if not normal, something resembling it following the historic pandemic, the likes of which, let's face it, none of us have ever witnessed before. The pandemic took a toll on everybody, it seems, in some fashion, certainly in varying degrees. And one area where it took a severe toll is in the area of domestic violence, sexual violence. Kathy Mull is the executive director of the Cocoon, Wood County's only comprehensive center working to provide safety and, yes, healing and, yes, justice to victims of domestic violence and sexual violence. Good to see you. When we talked during the pandemic and back in the height of the pandemic, you told us you were seeing a pretty stark uptick in this deplorable behavior. I think 40% increase in phone calls. But then I recently, Kathy, got an update. And this year, 2021, which started with promise, vaccines are coming, there's light at the end of the tunnel, has started in very sobering fashion. Numbers way up from an already very busy 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have not seen a decline in the number of survivors reaching out for services. And so as much as I think all of us, as you said, we're hopeful for some promise and maybe some end to some of the pandemic restrictions that were coming, and we have not seen that affect survivors in a positive way. So we, as of this year, have already served 421 survivors of domestic and sexual violence. And that's that's almost half of what we did last year. Actually, it's more than half of what we did last year. And so we're very concerned about the continued need for survivors in our community.
Well, as I thought about this interview, Kathy Mull, I wondered, how is it you define the success of your organization? Because helping more people, the numbers way up this year, at least are getting help from you, is kind of a, yeah, go Cocoon. But it's also rather a sobering cheer, isn't it? Because it simply means there are more people out there needing your help.
Mm-hmm. Right. Absolutely. It's a topic of discussion that we have all the time. And, with staff, we always say, what's our long-term projection? And our long-term projection is to work ourselves out of a job. And so that, there is no more violence that's occurring in our communities. And so, success for us looks like a few things. One, it is ensuring survivors have access to us at their time of need. So we want to make sure we continue to be around 24/7 to support survivors. And then in that, helping them reduce their safety risk. And so, how can we continue to have conversations that help reduce their risk, reduce the risk of their children? So that's number one, is that we want to be there to help support survivors in their time of need. But that's also why about a year and a half ago, we created our prevention program. And so, a lot of the work that we are also doing is going out into the community and having conversations about how we prevent domestic and sexual violence from occurring in the first place. Wow. The more that we can create that community, the more we can lessen the incidences of violence that are occurring for families.
I know your services are confidential. People can actually come to you and not reveal their own identity and still get help. And I would think up first is certainly their safety. You've mentioned that, medical attention for those who would need it, obviously. But I'm told you've developed an economic empowerment program, which I think is huge, because I know it's too often that economic dependence that keeps a victim in an abusive relationship.
Yes, I mean, there are typically, are three things that, survivors talk about that are the top reasons why it's difficult for them to extricate themselves from abusive relationships. And one of those is finances. One of the ways that an abuser maintains control and gains control over the survivor in the first place is by taking away their access to financial stability. And so we see that a lot in survivors that are coming either to stay in our emergency shelter or to be working with us out in the community, is how do I create that economic stability so that I can have long-term success once I've left that relationship. And so our economic empowerment program has been great because it's allowed us to work with survivors on everything as simple as opening up a bank account, learning how to budget, learning how to put some money away from savings. But also as far as going to, credit repair and, long-term financial viability for them. So, I mean, it's a huge service that we can provide to folks to help them, really be able to leave a relationship and stay out of that.
Among the unfinished business that remains out there, the idea of a strangulation law that Ohio doesn't seem to have engaged in yet. Explain that to our viewers.
Ohio is currently the last state across the country that does not have a standalone strangulation law. And so we at the Cocoon, among several other community partners of ours, have been working really hard to get Ohio to finally pass a standalone strangulation law. What we know is that a tactic that abusers will use in domestic violence situations is strangulation. It's a very quick and very powerful way to maintain and gain control over survivors. And it's very serious. There's a lot of long-term serious consequences for it. But Ohio doesn't have the mechanisms in place to really properly hold offenders of strangulation accountable. And so we're really working with our state legislature to finally pass a standalone strangulation.
Hey, while we have you, Kathy Mull is the executive director of the Cocoon in Wood County. Happy anniversary to you. 16, they just passed. It doesn't seem possible because I remember you guys came into existence. It's been 16 years ago. Congrats. Again, kind of that, we're glad you're there helping in our community. And I know that you're using this time to not only elevate the awareness, which we are doing today, you're reaching out to would-be partners for support. How important is that support? I mean, donations, if you will, to the work that you do.
We are extremely grateful to the Wood County community because they have for the last 16 years continued to step up and support us at the Cocoon, continued to step up and support survivors, and we couldn't do it without them. So all of the services that we provide to survivors on an annual basis are absolutely at no cost to them. But in order for us to be able to continue to provide those services at no cost, we rely on community financial support in order to be able to make that happen. And that's been more critical for us in these last 2 years than it's ever been, because we have been receiving funding cuts from the federal level. So as our numbers are rising, the level of violence is rising, our funding is decreasing. And so that makes us even more grateful and thankful for the community because their support means more now than ever.
Okay. Thecocoon.org, right, is where they can find you.
Yes.
Telephone number in the 419-373-1730. Do I have it?
Yes.
All right. Kathy Mull, thanks to you and your entire team down there for what you do, making a big difference. And thanks today for keeping us on the leading edge of the amazing work being done in support of victims of domestic and sexual abuse. Thanks for what you do, and we will talk again.
Thank you.
I'll be right back.